Remember, they say everything has a season. And in the cosmology that they follow, every season is ruled by an archangel. So the summer is Uriel, the autumn is Michael, Michael, the archangel is Raphael for the spring, and Gabriel is the angel for the winter. As you can see, all angels are Moors because they end with El. And Moors are always the ones bringing the message on behalf of Allah to the people. Which is why, out of all of the systems, I think it's wise that the Prophet chose nationalism as a means to extend that. But again, because the United States is acting as the occupying representative third party to America and the Republican form of government, its laws are what's functioning until that republic is restored. And that's the problem. We don't even be knowing what we be feeling. Like monachopsis is a subtle and persistent feeling of being out of place. Sonder is the realization that each passerby has a life as vivid and complex as your own. So to sonder is to do that. Opia is the ambiguous intensity of looking someone in the eye, which can feel simultaneously invasive and vulnerable. Imagine being able to qualify your feelings as you have them, as opposed to being subject to them. To do that, we have to understand the basis of what we're saying when we say, okay, well, I'm a Moor. Like, I don't like using the word Moorish American national per se, like my paperwork and stuff, because they've already, screwed that up. So a non-USA national is basically equivalent, but the term national as being applied to the character and property of the national government, you are a member of the national government as a American, or i.e. Moorish American, let's say, citizen of the republic by which it stands, not the democracy that interprets on behalf of the republic, you see, of which it actually usurped, which then means it's illegal. You see what I'm saying? But instead of Moors going back to their own Sherifian form of government, they want to join into the structure, which then prohibits them from having any say outside of the general consensus. You see what I'm saying? The constant United States destabilization of South America, for instance, we were talking about Cuba and all that, is all based in the fact that it is the oldest territory, one of the oldest territories of our people, of the empire. And a lot of the stuff that they use in that basin and bring up, they're able to sell up here and then export everywhere else. So that's why they'll hit all of these guys with cancer. But nobody will do nothing because they have a perpetual seat on the UN Council. So you see what I'm saying? The whole thing is rigged from that. Right. The USA, America being the optimal name for the state or states that you reside in. You see what I'm saying? So like when that guy Kevin Howard, Terrence Howard was talking about the flower of life and all of that, that's him coming into the realization again of the wave pattern that exists within all aspects of this grid that they got us all in. So if you are an Indian, if you consider yourself that, then you fall into these circles. You know what I'm saying? If you each one of these would represent a different aspect of consciousness or ideology that individuals get trapped up in. But within that circle, there's all these different divisions that make the individual what it is. But that has to be segmented and broken in order for them to exist under a state. So what made societies and empires last was how long they could preserve the nature of the original state of man that existed together in what this version of the Eden, which would be the garden, which would be the city, which would be the town, which would be the realm or whatever that they existed in up until whatever point. So they would see it as the fall of this empire. Let's say the Trasa Moors would look at the fall of the Draha Moors as the will of Allah. Because if they were still on the level that they was on, then they wouldn't have fallen victim like that. And this is why a lot of times we would fall as a collective as well, because in a way that's true. But that was considered the ancient way of thinking. You understand? Again, meritocracy. See what I'm saying? Religion came in and clouded that. And that became the basis, because now the ideology could be exacted through some sort of physical means, mostly extreme. You see what I'm saying? So from the flower of life, you get the seed of life, which then creates the egg, which again is the sunflower, the daisy, or whatever else. Because mammalian life projects outwardly what exists within it inwardly. So when we're seeing images of outer space, we're also seeing images of the inside of ourselves. You see what I'm saying? Or really, it might be that the inner space, to get to what we perceive as outer space, you have to go within the inner earth to do so, or within the self to do so. Which is what these original people that they started calling Indians that existed in the Antilles, Cuba, America, all of that was there. So right here it says, the derivative of the term Antilles is rather complex. The name Antilia or Antilles long antedates Columbus. Antilia was believed to have been the large island of the Atlantic, some 800 leagues west, about the size of Portugal, which according to the Ruyat Chronicles and the Portuguese myths was a refuge home for King Roderick, the last king of the Visigoths of Spain, along with the 7 Christian bishops and their following, who fled Portugal after the battle with the Moors in the 8th century, and whom peopled the 7 cities on the island. These 7 cities are what so-called Estebanico, Little Stephen. They sent the Spaniards in later to try to find those cities, because they were all where the gold and all of that was about. Was at. These are what they call the 7 cities of Cibola. You see? Which allegedly were connected or built in connection to the 7 sisters in the Pleiades cluster, which they call the Pleiades. So again, we're just trying to show and prove that this just says that after this happened, King Broderick and them came over here. So if they was white people, this means this dude predated Columbus. How come they never talk about him? See what I'm saying? Because they wasn't Caucasian people the way we see them today. They were different types of Asiatic people who were now practicing and indoctrinating and bringing in the so-called Christians or Cretans to then be adopted and used in proxy wars against one another, who then, as Mameluke slaves, eventually decided to raise up and form pacts with one another, and then started to recreate the history. That's what the Jesuits and all of them was about. Because remember, Colon was a Jew. There is no Columbus. It was only Cristobal Colon. And to this day, the Colon family is the only ones that could go speak to the Pope without no letter. Humboldt hypothesized the name Antilia was derived from Altin, the Arabic word for the dragon. See? And that would make sense because Piri Reis was the one that they got the map to find out how to even get over here, Admiral Piri Reis. This right here is called the Tolkien, which is the Mayan so-called calendar, but the periodic, also the periodic table of the Mayan people, but it's also the expression of the melanin molecule as it travels, which again representing the flower of life. It's all the same thing. All of this was more science taught to us in the form of religion as children. And then when we got older, we learned customary law and all of that, which then became an active practice that we refer to as Sherifian law, or over here also referred to as the Great Law of Gyanashqua, which really is the Great Law of Ma'at. See what I'm saying? It's all the same people because it's the same thing. It's the same people doing it, just calling it different things based upon the time period that they existed in and who or whatever they was battling with at the time. In our Moorish so-called Celtic forest culture, it was called Yggdrasil, the world tree. They just keep giving us back our own culture with their face on it, but with our clothes and stuff. Yes, that's why that was such a great book. He was kind of exposing that at a time when it was like this is where the Freemason stuff and all of the occult orders and all that stuff come in to cloud what they really trying to do. All that stuff is to ease you into not dealing with your own culture. I just showed and proved to you, or in this document or whatever, that the Arawaks, the Amerindians, and all these people is the same people that's in Jamaica and all these people today. But they told you they wiped out all of these people or whatever, and then they brought these other people from Africa, and it's okay. Yeah, they may have done that later, but that's not how the people got there. When Colon got there, they already had a society and a culture set up. The Tainos and the Arawaks was already a part of the Monarchan Empire. You know how they do. So based on the right of subrogation, you also have the right to your hereditaments. Your hereditament is anything that can be passed by an individual to your heirs. There are two types of hereditaments, corporeal and incorporeal. A corporeal hereditament is the permanent, tangible object that can be seen and handed and confined to the land, materials, coal, blah, blah, blah. An easement is a classic example of the type of hereditament since it's the right of the individual to use another's property and can be inherited. That's the DC. That's the what you call it, the instruments that they got on you. In any situation, you have the right to clear your name. So if they're calling you this and you let that go unchallenged, then you're agreeing that that's what you are, or that's what you're saying. So regardless to what they want to accept, you are not obligated to be a barrister of the court. You have the right to be heard. Everybody does, which is why they set up the administrative courts to keep people away from their true right to a republican form of government, which some in the vulgar sense would translate as an Article 3 government, which is dope. However, that works better when we are unified as a people and do this for ourselves. Because the state governments, like I said, are all incorporated aspects of the United States aspect, and that, albeit as it may, is really there to provide for the what do you call it, the international protection Remember, when Jefferson purchased Louisiana, he only purchased the barracks, the military barracks and all of that at the port. They forced the war of contrition against those Moors in those areas to be able to break Grenada and then create the whole situation for Jackson to come in as a maniac and then just kill and do everything else. But one thing about Jackson, he was against the foreign bank. So, you see, because remember, they killed Alexander Hamilton, a Moor, a Chevalier, set up Aaron Burr to do it, killed him because Alexander Hamilton was the one that was trying to still keep control of the national bank.